I think this is a problem with the larger archiving issue in India. Indians are notorious for not actually preserving their documents, and print media itself, lends itself to certain problems. For instance, the daily newspaper, its value is there only for a day. So, newspaper gets dated within a day, or a journal gets dated within a week or a month. And more importantly, the format of the newspaper is very difficult, makes it very difficult to preserve it. The big size. So if you have bound volumes of newspapers, it becomes very difficult to preserve. So it is both a question of the larger culture, ahistorical culture that Indians are notorious for, and the other is the very unwieldy nature of the journals themselves. That is one thing. Second question is, there is no real documentation of journalism in India. All we have, basically this, when occasions come, commemorative occasions come, say the silver jubilee or golden jubilee of a newspaper or a weekly, that's when they try to quickly put together some material. They look at their old records, old files. By the time actually the institutional memory is also lost. So what is done very quickly by journalists, not by historians. So if you look at the West, all the major newspapers and journals have commissioned uh, trained historians or former journalists who have the time. They are given time to produce histories. So Times will have a history, Economist will have a history, the Guardian, the Manchester Guardian, there will be a history. The stories of the biographies of major journalists have been documented. To even expand on it, there is history of the Times, then there is a separate history of Times literary supplement also. In India, we haven't done that. So what we get are scattered references. You have to look at the biographies of journalists, memoirs of journalists, autobiographies of journalists, and from these sources, you have to tease out this material. Then the cartooning itself, our the culture that we have grown up is that Indians value writing, but they do not value drawing and painting, especially drawing. In the sense that it is, this is some scribbling. If a child does some drawing, you say, is scribbling something. So that is the value that is attached to drawing, except when it is, of course, painting, oil paintings, acrylic, and things like that. Otherwise, sketches have not been as valued as other forms of journalistic elements. So this is the reason why we have to, for my work on Bharati's cartooning, I had to look at a whole range of autobiographies, biographies, memoirs, commemorative volumes over a very, very long period. And I have continued to do it even after I have published the first version of these essays nearly 22 years ago. I continue to find these kind of snippets, which I am trying to incorporate it into the larger story of cartoon. Bharati was a product of the Indian nationalist movement and the freedom struggle. His posthumous reputation is based on his poetry as a literary person. But as part of his nationalist activity, his involvement in the freedom struggle, poetry was, of course, a very, very personal kind of avenue for expressing both his thoughts and his patriotic sentiments, and also his artistic sensibilities found expression in his poetry. But he was also a journalist. He took his journalism very seriously because that was journalism, you can say, was also his occupation. What little money he made was only through journalism. His books didn't sell well at all. But that said, Bharati was editing journals by the time he was about 25. First, he edits a monthly magazine for women, but more importantly, by 1906, he is editing a very important weekly called India. that is this weekly India uh, strongly backs Bal Gangadhar Tilak's political line. Within the Congress, there were two streams, the moderates and the extremists. So Tilak was the head of the extremist faction, which had a very strident position in its anti-colonial struggle. Bharati's journal was towing Tilak's line, and there he was trying to make new innovations. For the first time, you can say that journalistic writing had fire in it. The earlier writings by Subramania Bharatiyar and others, even though very competent journalism, was not the kind of fiery writing that Bharati was doing. So as part he was trying to introduce new features, and we actually don't know where he got this inspiration, but he started to publish a cartoon on the front page of the weekly, as very soon after he became the editor of this journal. So by its very nature, uh, this journal, because of its strong anti-British, anti-government position, this journal was first its editor was arrested. The journal had to go to Pondicherry, shift to Pondicherry. Pondicherry was a French-ruled territory, so the British police could not do anything there. And even after Bharati went into exile there and relaunched the India, within about a year and a half, the journal was proscribed. So, as a proscribed journal, many people did not preserve it. And another event took place in 1911. The only political assassination in the freedom struggle in Tamil Nadu takes place on June 17, 1911. The collector of Tirunelveli, Robert Ashe, was assassinated by a Swadeshi nationalist. When the police investigated the case, they found many of the conspirators had Subramania Bharatiyar's journals and books with them. So Bharati was targeted, and in the general wave of repression, witch hunt, many of the nationalist sympathizers, they destroyed their copies of Bharati's books and journals. So to this day, of the 3.5 years of India's weekly journal, only 2 years of the journal survived. Now every issue of the India magazine, front page had a cartoon. So what has survived? Only 2 years of the 3.5 years have survived, and only one copy has survived. And these copies are, scattered in various archives. So this is the larger question of material availability of the journals. The other is the perceptual, the cultural practice, in the sense that, as I said, Indians celebrate people. We worship Bharati, but what do we actually know about him? What have we done for him? Practically nothing. So this is the case with most of our stalwarts and heroes. And Bharati was especially unlucky in another sense. Bharati died in 1921. So that is before nationalism became to put it crudely, nationalism became a profitable exercise. By the 1930s, congressmen had tasted power. When Bharati died, being a congressman meant actually being, being under police surveillance and getting into prison, getting your books back. So that was one primary reason. The second reason was he died unsung. So when he died, nobody knew who he was. There were exactly so far only 2 obituaries have been found of Subramania Bharati. The fact that Bharati functioned at a time when being a nationalist invited the wrath of the colonial government. Secondly, that he was unknown beyond a small circle, and that 11 years of the prime of his life, he lived in exile in Pondicherry. So the question actually is, how did he manage to break out of this kind of a situation conducive for putting people in obscurity. That he actually broke out of this obscurity shows what a amazing poet and genius he was. So first we have to clarify one thing. When I say Bharati is a cartoonist, Bharati actually didn't draw the cartoons. Okay, he was not an artist. But in those days, what is important is the concept. Bharati published cartoons in his channel. Didn't mean that he drew it. It was his concept. When nobody was publishing cartoons in any South Indian journal, North Indian journals there had some couple of them, because there was one major influence on Indian journalists. All Indian journalists looked up to the West, especially the British journalists. There was this very famous journal, comic journal called the Punch. So the Punch had lots of imitators in India. In India, there was something called the Hindi Punch, the Oud Punch. Lots of punches were there. Of course, these Punch magazines never pulled a punch. So I think Bharati was familiar with all these things. Bharati, very amazing thing about Bharati, who lived practically all his life in Tamil Nadu, especially 11 years in a very small town of his 39 years. He had travelled very little. He made one trip to Bombay and Surat. Once he had been to Calcutta. He had spent 5 years of his teens in Banaras. If you take out these years, he was not well travelled. He was not like Tagore. Tagore had gone to England before Bharati had been born, and Tagore was born with a silver spoon. And Bharati never had a comfortable life in all his 39 years. When he was 7 or 8 years, when he was about 10 years old, his father went bankrupt. So he lived under very indigent circumstances, but he had a vision. So he was widely read. He was a polyglot. Apart from his, of course, his great expertise in the Tamil language, he knew English, he knew Sanskrit, he knew Hindi, he learned French, and because of his strong grounding in both Tamil and Sanskrit, he could easily pick up the other Dravidian languages. I am sure he knew a bit of Malayalam, because his mother-in-law's, his wife's home was very near the Kerala border, and he also picked up a smattering of Bangla, and he read journals voraciously. So he read all the journals published from Calcutta. He also read journals published from abroad. So he had a very wide vision. So he knew what was happening in the world. So I think he imbibed this and he adapted this to his own journalistic and political needs. So we have to remember this. For him, nationalist politics is primary. He is also very critical of Indian tradition and heritage. He says we have to take the best from the past. He quotes from Kalidasa, where he says that, to say that everything that is old is great and everything that is new is good, is bad. It's not quite right. And he actually says people talk about Padamai, that is antiquity, old. What is old? What are you talking about? Is it 50 years past? Is it 500 years past? Or is it 5,000 years past? What are you referring to? So then he says, we should not be like those who drank saline water because it comes from a well which has been dug by one's father. அப்பன் வெட்டிய கிணறு என்பதற்காக உப்பு தண்ணீரை குடிக்கின்ற மூடர்களாக இருக்கக்கூடாது. So this is, you will understand this proverb only if you know the Panchatantra story. So any number of Panchatantra stories he draws from it, and that's why he is successful. after 1910, when Bharati's India stopped in early 1910, cartooning ceased. Cartoons ceased to be published in Tamil journalism. Bharati dies in 1921. Even then, even until then, nobody is publishing cartoons in Tamil journals. In 1925, a major nationalist called P. Varadarajan Naidu, he launches a daily called Tamil Nadu. In that journal, he revives and he starts publishing publishing cartoons in his daily. And then very important change comes in 1930. So 1930 is a very important phase in Indian nationalism. This is the second wave of mass nationalism. Civil disobedience movement is coming, Salt Satyagraha, Simon Go Back movement, and also there is the global depression is there. Indian economy is getting a spurt, and more people are getting politicized. So this is the time when the print run of Tamil periodicals increases dramatically. So until that time, the most that a Tamil periodical would sell would be about 5,000, 6,000 copies at the most. But by 1930, you have a new form of journal called the Kalana journal. Kalana is Quatrana. So they used to publish a magazine, a periodical, used sometimes as frequent as 3 in a week, priced at a quadrana. So this periodicals used to sell in 10,000s of copies. With this new form of journalism, cartooning becomes a very important element in the journalism. 3 journals, quadrana journals. One is called Gandhi, it is named after Gandhi. Then Sudandra Changu, then Urian. These 3 journals begin to carry cartoons on the first page. Then through the 1930s, all Tamil periodicals begin to publish cartoons. And that is the time when the first star in cartooning emerges. Until that time, cartooning is actually done by some paid artist. The editor will give an idea. They will say, draw such and such a thing. They say, draw a donkey and draw a Dobby, call the donkey the Indian legislator and the Dobby as the British government or whatever. So they will draw like what Bharati used to do. But from 1930s it changes. That comes in with the emergence of a very interesting figure called Mahalingam or Mali. Mali is from Tamil Nadu, but he has his early journalistic training in Bombay. Sadanand, yes, Sadanand, the great doyens of Indian journalism, who incidentally also is from Tamil Nadu. His father was a very important journalist who published the journal Viveka Chintamani in Tamil in the even in the 1890s. So Sadanand first starts the Free Press Journal. Then he is also the first to have a nationalist news agency. So Free Press Journal and Free Press News Agency are some of the earliest nationalist ventures in the field of journalism in the 1930s. He is the one who spots Mahalingam. So Mahalingam does cartoons in Free Press Journal, and then he is picked up by S.S. Vasan, who of course becomes later the great movie mogul of Gemini Studios. So he launches Ananda Vigadan in 1928. 1920, within a few months of taking over that journal, he hires Kalki as the editor. And then in the early 30s, Mahalingam is hired. Mahalingam does 2 things. He executes the cartoons for which ideas have been given by Kalki, but is also one of the, or probably the first to do caricatures. He does brilliant caricatures of both politicians, British officials and Carnatic musicians. So that is Mali's stamp is seen there. But interesting contrast, even at that time, Hindu is not producing original cartoons. What it is doing is it's buying the syndicated cartoons of David Lowe and they are published. The big change is that in the post-independence period, first cartoon becomes a very natural part of all periodicals, journals, weeklies and newspapers and even monthlies. So first that is. But a very important change is that cartoons become so natural that you don't have to draw on old mythological stories and animal fables. The readers have now matured and now they have got used to, in a sense, national and international protocols of cartoon. So that has happened. But at the same time, what is missing is that acute minds are missing in journalism. You don't have the kind of driven personalities of the independence era. You don't have Subramania Bharatiyar or Varadarajan Naidu or T.S. Chokkalingam. The idealism firing journalism has actually taken a back seat, and by even the 1940s, the daily press and the weekly press is becoming money spinning exercises. So it is being run by money bags. So completely, Indian Express, Dinamani is run by Ramnath Goenka. S.S. Vasan has become a big movie mogul. So it is more a business and less of a idealistic political enterprise. And as I said, now the readers are now used to national and international forms of. But more important, the change is in post-independence India with the introduction of universal adult franchise. All Indians are supposed to be equal. So the common man becomes pivotal to the cartoons. So all cartoonists have created their own image of a common man. Even though R.K. Lakshman's common man, has become the gold standard for the common man, but all cartoonists have. I think it's a more all India phenomenon. Indians are generally humorless people, and especially when you rise up in power, your tolerance limit becomes very low. People can't stand criticism, and more importantly, people, especially the powers that be, can't stand ridicule. So uh, if you don't like being criticized, if you don't like being made fun of, poked fun at, cartoons can't exist. So that is a big problem for Indians. Shankar got away with it because he was only lampooning Nehru, who was died in the wool liberal. But otherwise, politicians don't like to be mocked at, especially Tamil politicians. Tamil politicians, many of them are killjoys. And generally, Indian politicians are not actually real democrats. Yeah, the immediate contrast, of course, is with Kerala. Kerala has produced a series of great cartoonists, whether it is O.V. Vijayan or Ravi Shankar or you name it. So many cartoonists have come from Kerala. Tamil Nadu, number of reasons. One is the profession of the cartoonist is not a highly valued profession. The cartoonist always plays second fiddle to the editor. and he is a paid employee of the newspaper baron. So basically they have to carry out the dictates of. The second is, uh, we have not had really acute political minds. See, what can you expect from a cartoonist like Madan, who is a typical middle class Tambram who grew up in, Triplicane. You know, cartooning requires audacity. You have to be audacious. You have to, you need to have a political vision. The political vision of Tamil cartoonists has never gone beyond accepted middle class norms. You distrust the mob, you distrust the popular mind, you pay obeisance at the feet of God-man. You don't want to challenge the existing status quo. How can you have cartoons? I think Kerala has succeeded because of the strong left tradition, which gives a theoretical arsenal to criticize. You should have a political vocabulary to criticize, which has been provided by Marxism, which is essentially a very anti-status quoist ideology. Bengal is a different case because Bengal, when Bengal sneezed, Calcutta sneezed, India caught a cold. Bengal had the first Indian middle class. The Bengali middle class is at least 2, if not 3 generations older than the Tamil middle class. Okay. Because of the Bengali middle class is about 200 years old, if not even a little older. So middle class has had a very interesting engagement with colonial modernity. And I think they have also, the Bengali Bhadralok also have a tradition of being introspective, and they are not averse to self-criticism. So if you look at, for instance, Gaganendranath Tagore's caricatures, they really poke fun at the Bhadralok. Tamil journalists, until a generation earlier, they all came from the Tamil Brahmin middle class, and the Tamil Brahmin middle class has been notorious for not being introspective or self-critical. Rather, they have a sense of being persecuted. So if you feel persecuted, then you are not going to be critical of yourself. That is why you find that the level of humor in the Tamil public sphere is so low. So 1930s, as I said, was the time when Carnatic music comes into its own. It is able to successfully get rid itself of the stigma of the Devadasi tradition. Carnatic music and dance is completely taken over by the Tamil Brahmin middle class. The turning point is 1927 December Congress conference, which is held in Madras, Chennai. Music Academy is formed, and through the 1930s, the Carnatic music as we know it now actually gets formed in that period. The form of the concert, the kind of repertoire or the oeuvre that the artist sang, the relative hierarchy of the musical instruments, everything is defined in the 1930s. So as I said, that is the time also when the Tamil periodicals become quite popular, and Ananda Vidan spearheads this movement, which gives great scope and space for Carnatic music. So Mali is the one who draws all these caricatures of the various musicians. And I must also say that the 1930s musicians were also a very colorful lot. the kind of standardization that has now come was still not there. You had a great range of colorful personalities, and there was also a transition. The old Devadasi tradition, Chennamelam, Periyamelam, Nattunars, that was the fag end of it, and the new middle class with BAs, G and B, BA. G and Balasubramanian is a BA. Namangudi Srinivasa here is a graduate. So this is a new class of people who come, who they also create a new persona for themselves. They wear beautiful silks, take great care with their coiffure, they become personalities, and in this process the caricatures also come. And also the first time the audience is being represented in this. Until then there was no gap between the performer and the audience. It is not a proscenium medium, right? It's not a dais and a audience. Earlier it used to be in temples, people would come, go. So the performer and the audience were within the same space. But by 1930s, of course, it is the auditorium. So there is a gap. So this distance gets represented in the form of caricature of the audience. And also, music is about taste. And this taste is also about marking out. In the sense that, how do I differentiate myself from you? Is by demonstrating that my cultural tastes are more refined than yours. That is a very middle class form of distinction. In the temple, nobody would have tried to show that I am better than you because of my cultural taste. The man who wanted to drool at the beautiful dancer would drool. The person who wanted to watch the Adavu would be watching it. The Mudra who wanted to watch the Abhinaya would be watching it. There's no question of trying to have a hierarchy. But in the middle class wants to show that I am superior to you. You listen to your MS. I am DK Patamal kind of person. I want heavy music. I want to have intricate theory. This is, just listening to some bhajan and some devotional music is what lower people will do. So that marker is there, and Ananda Vigadam especially plays on it.